Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Go Rural Virtually. I'd like to begin by acknowledging our country. Today, we stand in footsteps millennia old. May we acknowledge the traditional owners whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land since men and women awoke from the great dream. We honour the presence of these ancestors who reside in the imagination of this land and whose irrepressible spirituality flows through all creation. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this meeting from the lands of the Turrbal and Yuggera peoples. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we all meet tonight, and any First Nations peoples participating in this meeting. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of First Nations peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. My name is Meredith, and on behalf of Health Workforce Queensland, I welcome the health students and speakers who have come together to be part of Go Rural Virtually, embracing rural placements. We selected rural placements because placements have the capacity to transform students professionally and personally, as well as create unexpected opportunities and lifelong memories. To explore what's involved in undertaking a rural placement, including the benefits, the challenges, and how best to prepare yourself, we've brought together an exciting group of speakers made up of placement coordinators, clinical educators, placement supervisors, and health students. So we're going to begin tonight's discussion with our two speakers who will broadly cover the topics of navigating the administrative elements of rural placements and the importance of practicing cultural safety. From there, we'll head into separate breakout rooms. There'll be a room for medicine, a room for nursing and midwifery students, and also a room for allied health, where you'll be able to have interactive discussions with our speakers relating to your disciplines. To finish, we'll meet as one group for feedback and to share some important resources with you. Because Go Rural Virtually is an interactive discussion between students and speakers, we encourage you to type the questions into the chat function throughout the all-in sessions. And that way the speakers can respond to you, or I will pause also throughout the discussion and we'll just maybe throw some questions out to the speakers. So please, we encourage you to use the chat function because Go Rural Virtually is for you, the students. So to start, I'd like to introduce Marie Nichols. Marie is a Senior Student Placement Coordinator with Murdapuna Centre for Rural and Remote Health in Mount Isa. Marie brings over 20 years of experience working in student administration and support. So I think that's a very good place to start, Marie. And I guess I don't know whether this is a political question or not, so but I think it's an important question. I know from Health Workforce Queensland, we have had a lot of experience with student placements through the John Flynn program when it was running, and through our Grow Rural program, we anecdotally we hear often that placements for medical students are much more accessible than for non-medical students. And I'm just wondering if that's something that you could perhaps address as you introduce the subject of rural placements tonight, please.
Okay, throw me in the deep end. That's fine. Okay, hello everyone. Yes, my name's Marie. In answer to that question, Meredith, I would say that it's possibly historically seemed or been easier for medical students to gain placements, possibly because they started, the medical schools, I guess, started sending out, the university started sending out students en masse, I guess, earlier than, say, allied health, for example. So I think we're in a bit of a catch up there. At this point, I would say that my understanding is that there seems to be a bit of I'm trying to say the right words without upsetting anybody, but it seems a lot easier for medical students to gain subsidies and things like that for to assist with going rural for placements, a lot more so than nursing or allied health students. So hopefully we can do our best to change that. But I guess that leads into my first little bit of spiel, which is basically explaining what a UDRH is. So a UDRH is a University Department of Rural Health. It is federally funded, specifically to increase allied health placements in rural areas, rural and remote. So we take we're an interdisciplinary group, so we will take medical students and students from all disciplines as we can, and so we are heavily focused on that interdisciplinary thing. But our specification from the government is for allied health and nursing placements. So that particularly with Metapuni, that is where our focus lies. Having said that, a large number of our students are still coming through as medical students. However, our goal is to increase the allied health student placement. So I'm hoping that that will be the case in the future. And obviously, placements are always determined by the number of supervisors and staff that we have there willing to take students. So, but we are working on that, and that is part of our goal. So basically, we are there to increase the numbers of health professionals in rural and remote areas with a focus on Indigenous health as well by taking students for rural placement. Now, I know that all UDRHs, even though they're the same, they're all different. It's just the way things go. It's like universities are all the same, but they're different. So I can speak for Metapuni. We don't charge for student placements at all in our accommodation, so you are accommodated free of charge as a Commonwealth supported student. We don't charge you anything at all, and everything is there. The accommodation is completely self-contained, so you don't need to bring anything except yourself, your clothes, and some toiletries. And we do our best to look after you. So UDRHs facilitate placements. They provide learning and study facilities. We have sim labs and libraries and things like that. So everything's kind of there. But I guess one of the big focus that we have is to ensure that you enjoy your placement. We do our very best to make sure that you have good supervisors so you have a good clinical experience. But you can get a good clinical experience pretty much anywhere. So our special point is that we give you a great time. So we will get you involved in the community. We'll get you involved in going camping. We provide camping gear. We do all sorts of things to make sure that you actually feel a part of the community, learn what a great place it is being in a rural town. And hopefully the idea is that you'll want to come back again after you've had such a wonderful experience. So and I can say with all honesty, hand on heart, we do get a lot of students who come for rural placement and who then actually come back in employed positions. So what types of placements do we have? Well, we cover a range of areas. So there are hospital placements, private practice, whether that's GPs or physios or anything that you can think of. We've got them there. Primary health clinics, particularly in our outreach placements, go through schools, Indigenous health services. Pretty much you can get a placement anywhere where there is someone that is able to supervise you, and often you'll find in rural, particularly in remote areas, that you may be covering 2 different places. So you might spend some time as a medical student in a hospital and in the GP practice, or you might go to a primary health clinic as a nursing student, or even as a medical student. We try to have interdisciplinary sessions, so you might get to spend some time in a pharmacy, you might get to spend some time in a different area of interest. We will do whatever we can to facilitate the best learning experience that we can get for you. Sorry, my clock's just stopped on how long have I got? Okay, trying to keep to time here, people. Okay, so one of the things that people say is, oh, why would I want to go rural? You know, it'd be better if I'm in the city. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you're wrong. You're not. You're going to have the best time in a rural placement. You will have a greater range of patients. You'll see a larger diversity of illnesses or conditions, or whatever it is that your area calls them, and you will be much more hands-on. You get to have more responsibility. You often have one-on-one or very small groups with your supervisors, so you can get that really good feedback and training, and from our wonderful, wonderful supervisors and preceptors who are interested in helping you to learn as much as you possibly can while you're there. As I said, we have outreach opportunities, particularly I'm based in Mount Isa, currently in Longreach, so we cover most of northwestern Queensland, and we have some amazing outreach opportunities in places like Burketown, Corumba, Normanton, and Weipa. As I said, these are interdisciplinary placements and great learning opportunities. You'll be with a range of students, all from different disciplines. You live with them, you talk with them, you can socialise with them, you can discuss cases and different aspects of everything, so that you learn that the most important thing being in a rural area is that you are part of a team and everybody has to work together. Then community involvement, like I said, I can only speak towards about Murapuni, but we, in all of our different places, we have contacts with our tourist attractions, and we actually subsidise students to go and visit things like, well, here in Longreach, the Qantas Museum, and in Mount Isa we send you on a underground mine tour. There are lots of things that you can go and see, and you know, there are so many different things in community, and people are so happy to have you around and to meet you that they will take you places. I know a lot of students in Mount Isa last summer took up water skiing, and I think they call it tubing or something, with the big tire tube thing on the back of the boats, because one particular student was talking to a supervisor, and he was talking to somebody else who said, oh, we're having a day out at the lake. And so suddenly we had students going out there every weekend, being picked up by different people and taken out there to do all sorts of things. So that's you know, something that we try to do. You'll find that there are 1,000,001 volunteer opportunities that you can get involved with as well. Great things to put on resumes. The other thing at the moment particularly is that there is a lot of work opportunity. So if you're worried that you're going to have to give up your work for 4, 6, 8 weeks, whatever it is, while you're on placement, there are always opportunities, and we're more than happy to help you source somewhere for you to do a bit of part-time work. I mean, whether that's in the local cafe or the local RSL club, or, you know, it doesn't matter. We will find something for you. Pharmacies are often looking for people to assist, even if it's just for a short time. So that's another option. Another one that we need to talk about is the realities of being of going on a rural placement. I know it can seem really daunting. A lot of people haven't been a long way from home before. They're not maybe not feeling confident about driving a long way to a placement, or flying somewhere and then not having a vehicle and things like that. So again, as I said, I can only speak for us, but all of our student accommodation is close to the hospitals, within walking distance. In Mount Isa, you can walk anywhere in town from any of our accommodation facilities. People are happy to pick you up from airports to take you to different things. It's, you know, one of those amazing things about community is that there's always somebody around who's willing to help you out with something. But just a few things, you know, driving long distances, make sure you've got water, make sure your car's been serviced. Fuel up whenever you feel the need to, because you know, sometimes you might not realize just how far it is to the next place where you can get fuel. Don't drive at night time. Don't drive in early morning or late evening, because you'll find that there's lots of critters around, some small, some very large, and they can do a bit of damage. So just be careful of that. Wherever you're going, I would suggest, particularly if you're coming out west or north, buy yourself a cheap prepaid Telstra SIM. Even the phones that they say run on a Telstra line will not work in some places. You have to actually have a Telstra phone. So please make sure that you get a little SIM before you go, and put a few dollars on it so that you always can contact somebody, particularly if you're driving, because there are long gaps between towns and you might find that you're out of service and you know you've got a flat tire or something. You need to have that. Another thing that you will find in rural areas, the more remote you go, particularly groceries are much more expensive. There's usually a smaller variety, and it may be difficult to cater for some kind of special dietary requirements. So if you're celiac, for example, or if you're vegan or whatever, then you may need to bring some staples with you so that you have them on hand. That's not to say that you can't get pretty much everything you want everywhere you go. Just the really very remote places where you'll find that there is a very small, limited selection often. But again, that's part of the experience of going remote, and you learn to see how everybody lives in these very tiny communities. So basically, just to kind of round up what I've been talking about, the amazing thing about going rural is that you get a really rounded experience. You're not shoved in the back of a room somewhere with 10 other students just kind of trying to see over the top of everybody to see what's happening, and not really getting much information or interaction from your supervisors. Out here, you're right up front, everyone's talking to you. You can have an amazing experience. It's a very diverse learning, everything, diseases that you may not see in the cities, to chronic disease, to following patients through. I've had students who've been out in Burketown on a placement, managed to get involved with an RFDS service that went out there to pick up a patient, and when they came back to Mount Isa the next week, they were able to go and see that lady and just make sure that she was okay, because that's where she'd been taken for surgery. So you get to know people, you get to feel a part of the community. Everybody's friendly, and the really big thing to keep in mind is that all the UDRHs provide support for students. I am on call 24/7 for students in northwest Queensland at the moment. you know, if you lock yourself out of your room, if you're feeling isolated or upset, there is always someone to speak to, someone who will do their best to make sure that you're okay, and anything that we can do to make everything go as smoothly for you as possible.
Thanks, Marie. That's great. I think there's been a couple of comments in regard to the SIM card. So I'll just read out what's being said. So Jess has said, sorry.
Yep.
Jess has said, I've only been as far west as Theodore, but an LD SIM worked pretty well in that region, just FYI. And somebody's asked, can you clarify what an LD SIM is for everyone in the room that may not know? And then David has insightfully written, yeah, but it's the gap along the road between the towns that is the issue with Telstra only having service. Optus and similar subcontractors like LD only work with a few Ks of the, within a few Ks of the centre of the towns. The other, sorry, David, did you want to say something? Or was, oh no. The other issue is if you are doing a long drive, you must have a travel plan and someone notified of expected arrival times at checkpoints. So someone is aware if you have not arrived and comes looking for you. That's, I think, a really important point. And I think that speaks to what you raised, Marie, about being part of a team, and we always look out for one another and we make sure that people know where we are. And you know, when people aren't where we think they are, we take, you know, we make sure that we can find them. And Kerry's written, living 500 Ks west of Townsville and 400 Ks east of Mount Isa, the only telecommunications that worked was Telstra.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think Telstra's won the vote here, guys.
We've got a question from Deanna.
Yes, I'm just going to jump to that. Thanks, Ev. Deanna's asked, is it possible to split placements between rural and home location?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, anybody can answer that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be completely up to the universities to decide how that would work. I would suggest it would have to be quite a long placement if you wanted to split that, depending on where you were and where you wanted to go. But generally speaking, I think placements, particularly coming out to Northwest Queensland, they are the whole placement is completed there. The other thing to keep in mind is that we do have minimum numbers of weeks that we can host students for as part of our contracts with the Department of Health. So yeah, but basically any kind of splitting of placements or whatever all have to go by the rules of the university that you're attending.
I might be able to help with that one. So with my final year nursing placements this year, I communicated to the uni that I lived out in Dalby and that if they were happy to put me on a placement out here, that I wouldn't need any accommodation provided. So I think if you just communicate with the uni to let them know why you would maybe want to go to a certain location and if it might be more practical to you, that it would definitely be possible to sort something like that out.
Thanks.
I'll just add in too, Meredith, if that's okay. Just from It's Sherilyn here, the clinical placement coordinator for Southwest Queensland. It is really, that's a good point, Kate, that definitely communication is the key. I come across a lot of local students and have done over the last 4 years where they are struggling with a university because they're not getting placements in Southwest Queensland, and that's where they ultimately want to do their graduate year. And it's a matter of, the question I always ask is, have you told them that you want to do your graduate year in the Southwest and that is where you want to go? And the big key is communication. Students definitely need to have that communication there. If they ever struggle, reach out to the Director of Nursing, to the facility, for example, for nursing students, or reach out to the facility or go above, talk to your lecturers at the universities and they can help as well. Even like Marie and myself, if we get a phone call from a local student that desperately wants a placement in Central West, Northwest or Southwest, we are going to help them. We're not going to tell you to call your university if you've already tried it 20 times. We're going to ask you if you've called your university, and if you have and you're having no luck, we will reach out to the universities and help support you to get that placement.
Thanks, Sherilyn. Another question, do all the same considerations apply, e.g. subsidised housing for international students? Who would like to pick that up?
I've just sent a response through to that. UDRHs and rural clinical schools are funded for Commonwealth supported place students, so not for international students. There is some discretionary ability, however, it's very limited, shall we say. We are audited very regularly, and unfortunately the government doesn't really take kindly to us breaking their rules. So so you can ask, but I will be honest and say that yeah, it's not something that we're funded for, and so we have to respond to questions from the government when they ask. The auditors can be not the nicest people when they think that we're wasting their money.
Thanks, Marie. And then somebody has asked, what's the minimum length of a rural placement? And I think David's answered on your behalf, Marie, to say JCU year 6 students usually do 10-week placements in Longreach elsewhere, and some students do 2 terms in Longreach, not sequentially, e.g. term 2 and term 4, and some do the whole year in Longreach. Just wondering if any of the other speakers would like to talk about what their minimum rural placements are.
So it depends on the discipline as well, Meredith, as to what the placement length of time is. Obviously for nursing, it's going to vary, and it varies also from education provider to education provider. So I think it's one of those things we're working towards extended placements quite heavily in the Southwest, and that's a minimum of 8-week placements. And that is due to the fact that we want people to stay in the communities for a longer period of time, so they get a better exposure, more opportunity to embed themselves in the community, and also possibilities there to gain part-time employment or casual employment while they're living here. So, and also the longer the length of the stay, the more they're usually eligible for as to bursaries and so forth, and free accommodation.
And my answer was actually for the person who wanted to know, is it possible to split placements between rural and home location? Okay. So you don't have to actually do it all at once. That was, so it wasn't so much the length of placement, it was just the fact that you can split them.
Great,
or
thanks.
Not at all.
Thanks, David, appreciate that clarification.
Just Dr. Tiffany here, one of the supervisors as well in Longreach. Central West is very well represented today.
We want you to be greedy.
Yeah, yes. I just wanted to add, in terms of that minimal length of placement, is that, like, at the end of the day, we want you guys to come and spend as much time as you can in our community. Like, we're passionate about these places and we want you guys to come and enjoy yourselves. But at the end of the day, we have a huge variety, ranging from sort of 2 weeks to, as we've said, some students do an entire year, depending on discipline and depending on university that they're studying in. But I can say that anecdotally, nearly every single group of students I've worked with this year has said they wish they stayed longer. And so one of the things is if just coming for 2 weeks is enough to get your toes wet so that you realise that it's something that you enjoy, then just slowly increase how long you're here, because I think you will find that you enjoy it a lot more than you expect.
Thanks, Tiffany. Anybody else want to add any comments or ask a question?
Just a quick thing, sorry to keep interrupting. I guess one of the other things to remember is too, because obviously David and Tiffany are representing Central West Hospital and Health Service, whereas, for example, Marie and myself are representing our UDRHs respectively, which is Southern Queensland Rural Health and Murder-Puri. So it's, I guess, understanding our different roles in the placement as well. So whilst Tiffany has said they're quite happy to take 1 or 2 week placements, which are your observational placements for medical and things like that as well, whilst the UDRHs are encouraging for longer term placements, it's not that we won't take or won't support and work towards the shorter placements. We just want people to come back out here and stay, because research has found that the longer they are, as Tiffany said, students generally say, we wish our placement was longer. So just so the clarification there with between the HHS and the UDRHs as well. We have different goals we need to report on, basically.
I think it probably also speaks to, you have to navigate that sort of thin line between, students who perhaps have no rural experience and just want to go 2 weeks, just let me do 2 weeks, just as just to get an idea. They don't want to necessarily commit to a long placement, but once they've done that 2 weeks, they're obviously happy to do a longer placement. But I think it's good to have the provision of that kind of a range of placement weeks. And I think that's perhaps where Health Workforce Queensland has assisted in their rural immersion program. So whilst they're not placements, they allow students to experience what it's like to live and work in rural communities, and then that encourages them to take up rural placements. So I think there's there's obviously arguments about long-term and short-term placements, but I think there's a very valid role for both approaches. Now, we had hoped to hear from Lee. She's a clinical educator with Southern Queensland Rural Health, but I think she's unable to join us tonight. And she was going to speak to us about cultural safety, but I just really want to take this opportunity because it's such an important area of placement, and because we know that the majority of students are really interested in Indigenous health, learning more about Indigenous health and participating in Indigenous health. So I just want to open up the floor to anybody who perhaps identifies as Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander, or people who have had experience of working in a community controlled health service, just maybe to talk a bit to students who where this would be an area of interest, but they're not quite sure, like, is it okay for me as a white person to go to an Aboriginal medical service on placement? Will I be accepted? What are the protocols? And I'm just wondering, is there anybody in the group that would like to kick that discussion off for the next 5 minutes?
So Christiane, who's sitting right next to me, I'm going to throw her under the bus. So Christiane is currently in a conjoint position with Southern Queensland Rural Health and SWATSITch, Charleville Western area,
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. Then it gets a bit blurry.
Corporation, I think it is. So I'm throwing her under the bus. She might be a good candidate, obviously, to talk about the experience within the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Health.
And just to add to that, I've also spent a lot of time up in Mount Isa. Even starting as a graduate, I worked up on Mornington Island. So some of the things that I've picked up throughout my career, working within the culturally safe practice of just getting back to your basics. So introducing yourself, who you are, what's your role, and then asking some questions, asking what their preferred name is, asking where they're from, are they local, or where they've come from and where their family is. So, and just taking into consideration, especially my background's in emergency nursing, we're seeing people at very vulnerable times, and just asking them whether they need a support person in with them, or sometimes with Indigenous families, they might need 4 or 5 people because that's their family, that's who they need to support them at that time. So just taking into consideration that it might be a little bit different to your family. Who I call mum and who I call father is a lot different to an Indigenous family, where they might have multiple people that take on that role of mother as well in their family. So they might need a couple more people in hospital with them, visiting and offering that support. In my role at SWATSITch, I'm coming in as an educator, so I do 2 different roles there. I'm helping run a child health program. which has been very exciting. We're looking at the ages 0 to 5, getting some programs up and running. And it's a completely different approach that I've taken in this program compared to my acute hospital experience, where we're even inviting them to come in, have a cuppa and just come and talk to us, find out who we are, where we fit in and what we're doing and what we want to achieve together. So it's definitely coming in and getting that experience that you've gained from university or in different other jobs that you've come in, taking that life experience and just working together. We've all got a common goal. So just finding out how each role can work together and what we're going to do to help improve health services. So we come in, we're taking them down to the pool one day and they get to splash around in the kids' pool, but that's all just introducing them to the health service, trying to get them in so that we can complete health assessments later on with someone that they know, someone that they've already talked to, who sat down and had a cup of tea with them. So it is completely different. And just being mindful that there will be some differences when you go out and practice. But just again, acknowledge that we don't know everything and just ask questions. They're really open. They love to share their stories and different cultural traditions and different things. So just taking that time to ask the questions, or if there's a social activity on, like we just had some of the students out and they did a painting session, but we also got to learn some of the symbolism in Aboriginal art and different things. So you can find common ground to talk to and different interests that you can, start a conversation with.
Vid, I think you had a question.
No, just to add to what Christy said, from a student perspective, I've done some rural placements or in Indigenous communities, been to Tennant Creek, been to Broome, Palm Island, Dimagee. And just to add to what Christy said, go in with, leave your preconceived ideas behind and, be open-minded. I think that's really important. And then you got to be aware of your own biases, which, it came to me, I'm like, I'm not racist, but you go there and sometimes the things you say, the way you interact, there are some preconceived or some biases or stereotypes that that kind of like affect the way you deliver your care or the way you interact with them. So kind of being aware of that and being open-minded and asking those questions, again, as Krista said. So when I was in Tennant Creek, ask for like a cultural safety session or cultural orientation, and then stay in touch with that person. So if any time you have a question, reach out to them, send them a message. And for me, I have a really good example. I did that with my the lady who delivered the session, and and one weekend she invited me to join her family to go out to the lake, and we had kangaroo tail and a Cup Mary style under the ground, and it was incredible. And just spending the day with them, learning from them, learning and understanding, and showing that you're willing to learn and ask questions. They will have, the community are really welcoming. You've got to just give them that opportunity and be open-minded to it.
Thanks, Vid. Yeah, I think that's a great summary, and certainly amazing opportunities come when we get to interact with Indigenous communities.
Meredith, if I might add something
Sure.
as well.
Yes,
Jo Caldwell, I'm the senior mental health clinician in Yarrabah in Girrini Yilamaka Aboriginal Health Corporation. And so Yarrabah is about an hour southeast of Cairns, up in the North Queensland, and it's the Indigenous community up there. And I received my permanent position through doing a student placement out there. And so it is absolutely welcoming to people that are non-Indigenous, and now being a permanent member of the health staff. There are not many of us that are non-Indigenous in my team, which is excellent. There's a few, just maybe one or two, and then the rest is local people from the community. And I have to say, absolutely welcoming. However, it is important that you go in with the right attitude. Be open to hear their stories, as we've already been told. Be open to having discussions about the ways. And some of the really interesting things that happen, which I've never seen happen in practice before, is that it's a very connected community. So if someone does an attend appointment, we jump in the car, we go around the house, we yell out the window, hey, where's such and such? We beat the horn. They go, oh, they're over at such and such's. So we drive around their house, we find them, and they come out and they say, yeah, sorry, I missed it. We had something going on. Can I book in again tomorrow? So you wouldn't find that in, I haven't found it in any of the other health places I've worked in. So it is quite a connected place to work in, and it is really wonderful because you, over the time that you do your placement, you do get to know the families and become really quite connected with them too. So yeah, I would highly recommend an Indigenous placement within a health service.
Thanks, Jo. Jo, do you feel qualified just to give the students a bit of an overview as to why Indigenous peoples are so reticent to go into hospitals and, you know, I guess white institutions?
Absolutely. So it is very, it's very much steeped back into the history, the intergenerational trauma that you see, and you do see it. And I know you learn about it in all the studies, but then you go there and you see the fears that have carried on through the generations of what happens. Even the other day, I had someone who said, no, I'm not going in there. My uncle went in there and he ended up never coming back. So it's that stories that have come through, and they're real stories. They're not just fabricated stories. Their experiences of trauma have been so great. They've been passed down, and that fear still lives within families and even young people today. That systemic racism that they have faced through, especially I find in Yarrabah, because it is a mission community. So the stolen generation was brought there to be placed. So we have traditional owners, but we also have generations of families that have lived there and have been placed there through the Aborigines Act and the stolen generation of the day. So there is that historic context that we are trying to work through by going out into community as much as possible, listening to the people as much as possible about what works for them. A lot of my sessions, my counselling sessions and therapy sessions are held on the beach because people don't feel comfortable coming in. We hold events to get people to come into the service, and they come in groups, which is, you know, we do the health checks, young people health checks, and they all coming together, and there's incentives, and there's it's, you know, to get people in. But yeah, there is that historical context. Is that, I hope that's what you're asking.
Yes, thanks, Jo. That's perfect. I think, and you know, what you touched on there is also important. The flexibility in where you practice your profession, and the language that you use is so important. So thank you for that, and thanks for everyone's contributions. It's time for us to go into the breakout rooms. So what we'll do next, everyone, is there are 3 breakout rooms. There's one for medical students, one for nursing, midwifery, and a 3rd room for allied health. So room 1, medical, room 2, nursing midwifery, and room 3 is allied health. So once you select your breakout room, you'll meet other like, you know, students with the same discipline, but also speakers who have experience of placements or of being supervisors, and of course students who have already done placements. So we're going to have a 35-minute discussion, and then we're all going to come back together, you know, and a reminder that, you know, Health Workforce Queensland is here to support everyone in whatever way we can. You've met the Future Workforce team tonight, myself and Evelyn and Wendy. But we also have an additional resource which we call Going Rural, and I have mentioned it quickly earlier tonight. But Going Rural is was started really in response to, as I started the conversation tonight with Marie, we noted from students that non-medical students really struggled to firstly go on placement, secondly to go on a rural placement, and to have any support in terms of accommodation and transport costs. So we established Going Rural, and this is open to students going on placement at primary healthcare settings, and it pays up to $1,000 per placement, and that's to help cover those costs that, you know, because we know that you're disadvantaged when you go on placement in terms of not being able to maintain your employment and of often having to pay additional rent. So that's just a way we have of helping you out, and we encourage you to visit the Health Workforce Queensland website. There's a specific page there for students, and you'll find all of our programs there, as well as what we call the Students Resource Hub. And there on that page, we have links to, for those of you that want to learn more about placements, there are links there to guides, to some of the videos of students who have been on placement, scholarships and bursaries, and also organisations that, excuse me, people are coming home next door, so you'll probably hear noisy, excited voices. So in addition, there's also a organisations or locations who are happy to take students on as placements, and we'll be happy to add to that list of any of the speakers or organisations tonight would like to be part of that. We're very happy to add you. So I'm mindful that we've run out of time, and I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of the questions, all of the discussion points. It's such an important area, but I do want to thank firstly all the speakers who came on board tonight. They volunteered their time to be here. Obviously, you know, they all have very busy workloads, but they've given their time generously to speak with you. And we value their expertise and their knowledge. And as we do the students, all of you who came on board tonight and participated, and have a good night, and we will be back in 2023 with a whole new series of Go Rural Virtually, so stand by. Thanks everyone, and good night.